Imagine sitting at your kitchen table on a Monday evening, texting your sister about a birthday gift while your kids play nearby and dinner is almost ready. Everything is normal. Everything is warm. Everything feels safe. Now imagine that 7 minutes later, you're lying on the floor in a pool of your own blood, and your babies are too. That's exactly what happened to Emma Young-Stig on the evening of March 17th, 2008. And the most terrifying part? The person who did it had been watching her for months, planning, waiting, hating her for something Emma didn't even know she had done. This is not just a story about obsession. This is a story about what happens when someone loves a person so deeply, so dangerously, so completely out of their mind that they decide if they can't have him, then no one else deserves to live happily either, not even the children. Let's go back to the beginning. Emma Young-Stig was born in Stockholm, Sweden on February 16, 1985. She grew up in a simple, ordinary household with her parents and her older sister, Katarina. She wasn't famous, she wasn't rich, she was just a regular girl from a regular family trying to figure out life one day at a time. By the time she was 19, Emma was already married. She had fallen in love with a boy named Nicholas back in high school, and the two tied the knot young, with Emma already expecting their first child. At 20, she became a mother to a little boy named Max. A year and a half later, their daughter Saga was born. On paper, they were a young family starting their life together, but behind closed doors, things were cracking. They were simply too young, too unprepared, and too different to make it work. The arguments never stopped. They fought over small things, big things, everything. And eventually, after Saga arrived, both of them accepted what had become painfully obvious. It was over. What followed was one of those messy, heartbreaking divorces that drag through courtrooms and leave everyone exhausted. Nicholas loved his children and wanted to be in their lives every single day. He didn't just want to write checks and show up on holidays. He wanted to be a real father. Emma wasn't trying to keep him away entirely, but then she met someone new and decided to move the kids to a town called Aruga, about 150 kilometers from Stockholm. That was the breaking point for Nicholas. He fought her in court. He threatened her. She reported him to the police. It became ugly, bitter, and personal. But that chapter, as painful as it was, is not the center of this story. Because while Emma and Nicholas were battling in courtrooms, a completely different person had quietly entered the picture. And this person was far more dangerous than any angry ex-husband. His name was Torny Hellberg, and Emma found him the way so many people find love these days, through the internet. They started talking, and the connection was instant. Torny was warm, stable, and ready for commitment. He wasn't scared of Emma's 2 kids. In fact, he welcomed them. He had always dreamed of having a family, and here was a woman who came with one already built. For Emma, after the chaos of her first marriage, Torny felt like solid ground. The couple grew serious quickly. Torny had a good job and a steady income. Emma had a background in design and planned to return to work once the children were a little older. Together, they moved into a bigger house so each child would have their own room. They were building something real. They were building a future. They planned their wedding for the summer of 2008. They never got there. On the surface, life was as good as it had ever been for Emma. She had a loving partner, 2 beautiful children, and a home that finally felt like a home. But while she was living that quiet, happy life, someone else was watching it from the outside. Someone who believed with every broken piece of her mind that this life, this man, this happiness belonged to her. And on a cold Monday evening in March, while Emma was typing a message to her sister and her babies were playing just a few feet away, that someone knocked on her front door. Emma opened it, and her world went black. There is a very thin line between love and obsession. Most people never cross it. They feel the heartbreak, they cry, they heal, and they move on. But every once in a while, someone comes along who refuses to accept that a relationship is over. someone who rewrites reality inside their own head until the story makes sense only to them. Someone who sees another woman's happiness and calls it a theft. Christina Schurer was that person, and by the time anyone figured out just how far gone she truly was, 2 children were dead and their mother was fighting for her life in a hospital bed. Christina was born in 1977 in Hanover, Germany. From the very beginning, her life had a crack running through it. Her father left the family when she was still a little girl and almost completely disappeared from her life after that. Anyone who studies psychology will tell you that kind of early abandonment leaves a mark. It quietly shapes the way a person sees relationships, love, and the fear of being left behind. For Christina, it planted a seed that would grow into something no one around her fully understood until it was too late. She was smart, that much is clear. She studied history and archaeology, traveled across Europe, participated in excavations and research expeditions. She was the kind of person who could hold a deep, fascinating conversation. As a teenager, she even went to the United States on an exchange program and lived in New York for several years. From the outside, she looked like an educated, independent, worldly woman who had everything going for her. But underneath all of that, something was always off. That summer, a 26-year-old Swedish man named Torny Hallberg came to the hotel for vacation. Christina noticed him immediately. Torny was friendly, easygoing, and good-looking. He liked her, too. She was interesting and different from anyone he had met before. They spent time together, and by the end of the week, a romantic connection had formed. It was a holiday fling, warm, fun, and with an expiry date. But Christina didn't see it that way. When Torny flew back to Sweden, she kept calling. She kept messaging. She wasn't letting the distance quietly kill what they had. A few months later, she showed up at his door in Sweden, asking to stay. Torny was uncomfortable but polite. When she suggested a weekend trip to the mountains together, he said no. He hoped that would be clear enough. It wasn't. The calls continued. The messages kept coming. She kept pushing for visits and meetings. In January 2007, Torny finally said it out loud during a phone call. "It's over. Don't contact me again. Please move on." Christina heard the words. She simply chose not to believe them. In the spring of 2007, she came back to Sweden again. She told Torny she had left something at his house and needed to pick it up. He agreed, thinking it would be a quick, simple exchange. But the moment they were both inside, she tried to seduce him. When he firmly turned her down, she looked at him and said something cold and quiet. "You'll regret this." She left. But 3 months later, she was back again, apologizing, begging, promising she had changed. Torny rejected her again. That same evening, she called him and told him she had swallowed a handful of pills because she couldn't live without him. He called an ambulance. He called her family. He told them what had been happening and urged them to get her professional help. Christina spent over a month in a psychiatric hospital after that incident. 1 month. And then she was released back into the world, still completely consumed by the same obsession, just slightly better at hiding it. By October 2007, Christina had made a decision. She packed her things, left Germany, and moved to the suburbs of Stockholm. She rented an apartment with a roommate and settled in. She had no job lined up, no real plan, no friends in the area. She moved there for one reason only, to be close to Torny. By this point, Torny had already met Emma. He was falling in love. He was happy. He was building a life with a woman and her 2 small children. And Christina knew all of this because she was watching. She was following his social media, studying his posts, tracking his movements from a careful distance. And instead of finally accepting that it was over, something inside her shifted into a much darker place. That's when the lies began. In late 2007, Christina contacted Torny with a bombshell. She told him they had a son together, that she had become pregnant after one of their meetings and had given the child up for a foster family. She said the boy had been diagnosed with a hereditary illness and that Torny needed to come with her to Germany to see him. Torny was shocked, but not convinced. Emma helped him think it through clearly. The last time he and Christina had been intimate was well over a year before this conversation. They had met several times since then, and Christina had shown absolutely no signs of pregnancy at any point. The story had holes everywhere. Then, a man called Torny, claiming to be the child's adoptive father. Torny, guided by Emma, started asking simple questions. When was the boy born? Which hospital? The man on the other end got irritated, dodged every question, and eventually hung up. There was no child. There had never been a child. Christina had invented an entire baby, a sick child, an adoptive family, a phone call, all of it, to manufacture a reason for Torny to need her again. Think about what it takes to do something like that, to fabricate a child, to involve another person in acting out the lie, to look someone in the eye and describe a baby that never existed. That is not the behavior of someone who is simply heartbroken. That is the behavior of someone who has completely lost their grip on what is real and what isn't. And yet, the worst was still to come. Because after that lie fell apart, Christina didn't break down and disappear. She didn't check herself into therapy. She didn't call her family and ask for help. Instead, she started searching the internet for something far more sinister. How to commit a murder without leaving traces. How to hide evidence of a crime. How to make yourself look innocent. And she started making trips to a small town called Aruga, a town where a young woman named Emma was setting the dinner table, texting her sister, and watching her children play. A woman who had no idea that someone hated her deeply enough to be planning the unthinkable. There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. One side of the line is normal. Dinner on the stove, kids laughing, a phone buzzing with messages from your sister. The other side of the line is something you can never fully come back from, no matter how many years pass or how hard you try. For Emma Young-Stig, that line was drawn at exactly 7:07 in the evening on Monday, March 17, 2008. That was the last timestamp on her final message to her sister Katerina, a message that stopped mid-sentence, a message that was never finished, a message that, without either of them knowing it at the time, was a goodbye. The day had been completely ordinary up until that point. Torny had left for work early in the morning. Emma stayed home with 3-year-old Max and 18-month-old Saga. She did what she did every day. She took care of the children, kept the house in order, and managed the quiet rhythm of a young family's Monday. In the evening, she started preparing dinner. While the food was coming together, she opened her laptop and started chatting with Katerina. The two sisters were planning a gift for their parents' upcoming wedding anniversary. It was a warm, light-hearted conversation, the kind you have 100 times in your life without ever thinking it might be the last one. At around 6:30, Torny called from work to let Emma know he was running late. He told her not to wait for him and to go ahead and eat dinner without him. It was a brief, casual call, nothing unusual. Emma fed the children, cleaned up a little, and then sat back down at the computer to keep talking with her sister. At 7:07 p.m., Katerina watched her sister's name appear on the screen as if she was typing. She could see Emma was in the middle of sending something, and then nothing came through. The typing stopped. The message never arrived. Katerina waited a minute, then another. Then she called Emma's phone. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. A knot began forming in her stomach. She tried Torny's number next and caught him just as he was pulling up to the house. He assured her everything was probably fine, that Emma was likely just busy with the kids, and that he would check in as soon as he got through the door. He never got to make that call. The front door was unlocked. That was the first thing Torny noticed. Emma was always careful about that, especially in the evenings with the children inside. He stepped in and immediately saw the mess. Toys, scattered objects, things out of place. His first thought was that the kids had just been running wild while Emma wasn't watching. Then he saw the stains on the floor. Dark brown, spreading in uneven patches across the hallway. His brain resisted what his eyes were seeing. He called out Emma's name, then Max's, then Saga's. The house answered with silence. He moved deeper inside and found something on the floor that his mind initially refused to process correctly. A small figure, lying completely still in a pose no sleeping child would ever rest in. He thought for one horrible second that it was a doll. He moved closer. It was Saga, 18 months old. Her tiny face and head had been beaten so severely that she was almost unrecognizable. A few feet away lay Max, 3 years old, with a fractured skull, completely unconscious. And further along the floor was Emma, covered in blood, her face badly damaged, lying in a position that looked like she had been trying to crawl somewhere before she collapsed. Torny's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone. He dialed emergency services and managed to get the words out. "People are hurt. Children, please come now." In that moment, as he stood in the hallway of the home he had built with love for the woman he was going to marry and her 2 babies, his entire world caved in. Paramedics and police arrived within minutes. The scene that greeted them was one that the responding officers would later describe as among the worst they had ever encountered in their careers. The medical team immediately began assessing all 3 victims and made a grim discovery. All 3 of them still had a pulse. Barely, but it was there. The paramedics worked with everything they had, stabilizing the victims enough to transport them. From the very first moments, the medical team expressed serious doubts about whether any of them would survive the journey to the hospital, let alone what would come after. The injuries were catastrophic. All 3 had open head wounds with severe brain damage and had lost enormous amounts of blood. By the time the ambulances arrived at the hospital, doctors were already bracing for the worst. They fought anyway. Max and Saga never regained consciousness. Despite everything the medical team did, the injuries to the 2 children were simply too devastating. The little boy and his baby sister passed away, and the news broke like a wave over everyone connected to that family. Torny was told at the hospital. Emma's parents, who had driven from Stockholm the moment they heard something was wrong, learned about the deaths of their grandchildren through a radio news report while they were still in the car on the way there. Think about that for a moment. Finding out your grandchildren are gone through a news broadcast before you even arrive, before you can hold anyone, before you can even catch your breath. Emma was placed in a medically induced coma. Her condition was serious, but unlike her children, she had a chance. Doctors connected her to life support and let her body rest while they monitored every sign of progress. A 24-hour police guard was posted outside her room immediately because investigators understood something critical. Emma had survived, which meant she was a witness, and if whoever did this found out she was still alive, they might come back to finish it. While the hospital fought to keep Emma alive, forensic investigators descended on the house in Aruga. What they found was both helpful and deeply frustrating. The crime had been committed in 13 minutes or less. They knew this because Emma's last message to Katarina was time-stamped at 7:07 p.m., and Torny's emergency call came in at 7:20 p.m. 13 minutes. That's how long it took for someone to walk through that door and destroy an entire family. The weapon was never found at the scene. Based on the nature of the injuries, experts determined it was a heavy blunt object, almost certainly a hammer. The attacker had taken it with them when they left. No fingerprints were found either. Whoever did this had worn gloves. The biggest problem facing investigators was the state of the crime scene itself. The paramedics, doing exactly what they were supposed to do, had moved through the house quickly and urgently to reach the victims. In doing so, they had disturbed the floor, shifted objects, and left their own footprints everywhere. Now the forensic team had to patiently separate every single print, every scuff mark, every trace, and figure out what belonged to the medical team, what belonged to Torny, and what might belong to the person who had committed this crime. It was painstaking, slow work, but it was necessary. Neighbors were interviewed throughout the following day. Most had seen nothing unusual, but one woman remembered something, Around 5 in the evening, she had noticed a figure in dark clothing with a hood pulled up, walking slowly around the outside of Emma and Torney's house. She thought the behavior was odd. The figure was small and short, almost fragile looking. She initially assumed it might be a young woman rather than a man, but the hood made it impossible to see a face. That same figure appeared on surveillance footage from a store just a couple of minutes' walk from the house. Small, dark-clothed, hooded, moving with a purpose that didn't look like someone out for an evening stroll. Investigators pulled Torney aside and showed him the footage without telling him who they thought it might be. They wanted his unfiltered reaction. He went pale before the clip even finished playing. He said it could be Christina, his ex-girlfriend, the one he hadn't been able to shake for nearly 2 years, the one who had faked a pregnancy, staged a suicide attempt, moved countries to follow him, and told him he would regret rejecting her. That name changed everything. Detectives moved fast. They tracked down Christina Schurer's address in the Stockholm suburbs and went straight there. Her roommate opened the door and told them something that made their blood run cold. Christina had packed her bags the day before and left for Germany in a hurry. She already knew they were looking. An arrest warrant was issued on March 20th. With the help of German authorities, Christina was located and taken into custody. She was calm when they found her, almost eerily so. She said there had been a mistake. She said she had nothing to do with any of it. She was brought back to Sweden on March 29th, and the first thing she asked for, before anything else, before a lawyer, before an explanation, was a meeting with Torney. It was denied. What investigators found when they searched her apartment and seized her laptop would remove almost every remaining doubt from their minds. Hundreds of photos of Torney, both from their time together and taken more recently from a distance. Photos of Emma copied from her social media page. Photos of Max and Saga with captions written underneath them that were so threatening, so full of hatred, that the detectives reading them had to stop and collect themselves. In her search history, how to commit murder without leaving evidence, how to dispose of a weapon, how to avoid suspicion. In her notes, a hand-drawn layout of Emma and Torney's new home, records of what time Torney left for work each morning and what time he came home each evening, detailed observations about the family's daily routine. And there was something else. Surveillance footage from a bus station near Aruga showed Christina had made the trip from Stockholm to that small town 3 separate times in the week before the attack. 3 visits to a town where she had no friends, no family, no reason to be. Except one. She had been watching, she had been timing, she had been preparing. There is something deeply unsettling about watching a person sit in a courtroom accused of beating 2 small children to death with a hammer and smile. Not a nervous smile, not a confused smile, not the kind of smile that comes from anxiety or discomfort in a high-pressure room. A genuine, relaxed, almost cheerful smile. The kind you wear when you walk into a room full of people you're happy to see. That is exactly what Christina Schurer did on July 29, 2008, the day her trial began. She walked into that courtroom, looked around at the gallery, and waved, like she was greeting old friends at a reunion, like she had been looking forward to this. And in that single moment, before a single word of testimony was spoken, everyone in that room understood they were looking at something they had never quite encountered before. But before we get to that courtroom, we need to go back a few months, because the investigation that led there was anything but straightforward, and there were several moments where it looked like Christina might actually walk free. The evidence against her, while deeply damning in nature, was almost entirely circumstantial. The murder weapon was never recovered. There were no fingerprints placing her at the scene, no DNA, no witness who had seen her face clearly on the night of the attack. Her laptop full of threatening captions, murder research, and hand-drawn maps of Emma's house was disturbing evidence of intent and obsession, but a skilled defense attorney could argue that disturbing thoughts are not the same as criminal actions. The shoe print was one of the stronger pieces of physical evidence.
Investigators had painstakingly separated out one set of prints from the chaos on the floor of the house, prints that didn't belong to the paramedics, to Torney, or to any of the victims. The print matched a specific brand of athletic shoe, and the size matched Christina's foot. But Christina flatly denied ever owning that model of shoe. Then her roommate spoke up. The roommate confirmed not only that Christina had owned exactly that type of shoe, but also pointed investigators towards something else, a hammer. A specific hammer that had been part of a toolkit kept in their shared apartment. The roommate noticed it was missing sometime around the period of the attack. When she handed over the toolkit for examination, forensic analysts determined that the size and shape of the missing hammer was entirely consistent with the weapon used in the crime. Still circumstantial, still not a smoking gun, but the picture was becoming clearer with every passing day. And then there were the bus station recordings. Christina captured on camera making 3 separate trips to Arboga in the week before the attack. 3 visits to a small town where she had absolutely no reason to be, no connections, no purpose. 3 visits that lined up perfectly with the timeline of someone conducting surveillance on a target. When investigators asked her directly why she had traveled to Arboga so many times, Christina had no answer. She sat quietly, looked at the table, and said nothing useful. The case went to trial with what they had, and what they had, it turned out, was enough. The trial lasted several weeks. The prosecution laid out the full story methodically and carefully. They walked the jury through every stage of Christina's obsession. The holiday romance in Greece, the refusal to accept it was over, the repeated trips to Sweden, the fake suicide attempt, the invented child, the move to Stockholm to be closer to Torney, the threatening captions on photos of a mother and her babies, the internet searches for how to get away with murder, the surveillance trips to Arboga, the rushed departure to Germany the morning after news of the attack broke.
Each piece on its own was a thread. Woven together, they formed something suffocating and undeniable. The defense did what defense attorneys are supposed to do. They challenged every piece of evidence individually. They pointed out the lack of direct physical proof. They questioned the reliability of witness identifications. They argued that their client's strange behavior and obsessive tendencies did not make her a murderer. And they raised the possibility that Christina was mentally unwell, that perhaps she didn't fully understand what she had done or what was happening around her. It was a reasonable argument, given everything that had come before: the suicide attempt, the invented pregnancy, the obsessive stalking. A psychiatric evaluation was ordered. The result stunned many people in the room. Christina Schurrer was declared completely sane. She was not suffering from a break with reality. She was not psychotic. She understood exactly where she was, what she was accused of, and what the consequences were. She simply didn't care. That finding reframed everything. Because if she was sane throughout this trial, then she was sane when she was sitting in her apartment writing hateful captions under photos of a toddler. She was sane when she was searching the internet for ways to cover up a murder. She was sane when she walked up to that door, knocked, and swung a hammer at a young mother and her children. She knew, she planned, she chose. And now, sitting in that courtroom, she was choosing to smile about it. When prosecutors showed crime scene photographs, the kind that made hardened investigators look away, Christina laughed. Not a gasp, not a flinch, not tears or visible distress. She laughed. The sound reportedly sent a chill through the entire room. Several jurors visibly reacted. Members of the public gallery covered their mouths. The judge called for order. Christina sat back in her chair, apparently unbothered. Then came the moment that broke the entire courtroom open. Emma Young-Stig had recovered enough to attend the trial. It had been months of grueling physical rehabilitation, months of waking up and having to be told again and again that her children were gone, months of a brain slowly piecing itself back together while her heart refused to accept what it was being shown. She came anyway. She sat in that courtroom because she needed to be there, because Max and Saga deserved to have their mother present when justice was being decided for them. When Emma walked in and her eyes found Christina across the room, she fainted.
The people around her caught her and helped her out of the room. When she came around and was calm enough to speak, she said something that stopped everyone cold. She said that she finally remembered, fully and completely. The face she had just seen across that courtroom was the last face she had seen on the night of March 17th. It was the face on the other side of the door when she opened it. It was the last thing she saw before her world went dark. Emma's recovered memory wasn't entered as formal legal evidence in the traditional sense, but its impact on everyone present was impossible to ignore. She had just looked across a courtroom and identified the woman who had destroyed her life in front of a jury without hesitation after months of her mind protecting her from the memory of that face.
The jury didn't take long. They returned a unanimous verdict on all counts. Guilty of the double murder of Max and Saga, committed with particular cruelty. Guilty of the attempted murder of Emma Young-Stig. Christina Schur was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of release. Ever. She was also ordered to pay 20,000 euros in compensation to Emma. When the verdict was read, Christina's expression barely changed. No breakdown, no protest, no flood of emotion. She sat there and absorbed the sentence with the same unsettling calm she had carried through the entire trial. Outside the courtroom, Emma's family held each other and wept. Not entirely from relief, because relief implies that something has been restored. Nothing had been restored. 2 children were still gone. A young mother still had to wake up every morning in a world without Max and Saga in it. A verdict doesn't fix that. It never does. But it was something. It was the truth being spoken out loud by 12 people who had listened carefully and decided that what happened in that house on a Monday evening deserved to be called exactly what it was. Emma's physical recovery continued slowly over the following years. The brain injuries she sustained were severe, and healing from something like that is not a straight line. There were setbacks. There were days that were simply impossible to get through. There was grief layered on top of grief, because she wasn't just recovering from a physical attack. She was rebuilding an entire sense of reality while simultaneously mourning 2 children she had carried, given birth to, and raised with her whole heart. Torny never left her side. Through the hospital stays, the court appearances, the hard days, and the harder nights, he stayed. They had planned a wedding for the summer of 2008. That summer came and went, swallowed entirely by tragedy and recovery. But in the summer of 2010, 2 years later, they got married, quietly and privately, surrounded by the people who loved them. They went on to have children together, 2 kids who grew up knowing the names Max and Saga, knowing the story of the older brother and sister they never got to meet, knowing that love inside a family is something worth protecting fiercely. Christina Schur remains in a Swedish prison today. She will die there. That is what the law decided, and by every measure of the evidence presented, it was the right decision. But here's the thing about this story that stays with you long after the verdict and the sentencing and the courtroom drama fade into the background. Christina was not unknown to the people around her. She had shown signs for years. The obsessive behavior, the fake suicide attempt, the invented pregnancy, the stalking across international borders. All of it happened in plain sight. People saw it. Torny's family knew. Her own family knew enough to place her in a psychiatric hospital. And yet, somehow, she was released back into the world after just over a month and left largely to her own devices. 2 children paid for that with their lives. Obsession is not quirky. It is not romantic. It is not a sign of how deeply someone loves you. It is a warning. And when someone tells you they will make you regret rejecting them, when someone fakes a death to keep your attention, when someone crosses a country to follow you, those are not grand gestures. Those are flares going up in the dark. The tragedy of Max and Saga is not just what happened to them. It is that what happened to them did not have to happen at all.